In today's video, we're looking at the latest NHL trade talk as we head into the All-Star break. Could players like Kevin Fiala, Patrik Laine, or Kapanen find themselves on the move in the near future? Plus, we also have news from the NHL waiver wire. The Anaheim Ducks have hired a new GM, and many NHL executives, according to the latest reports, are quite frustrated and upset with the Coyotes' plan to play in a small arena at ASU for the next 3 to 4 years. We'll discuss all that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and rumors to discuss today. First up, quick item from the NHL waiver wire. Goaltender Michael Auger of the Buffalo Sabres was placed on waivers yesterday. He did in fact clear, so the 29-year-old goaltender, who's bounced around a lot between various levels of hockey the past couple of years, will indeed go back to the minors, and we'll see. But he certainly provided a couple of good games there for the Sabres, and certainly a great example of perseverance and sticking with it to get some NHL action and reach your goals and dreams, even if it's later into your career than you ever imagined. So good on him, and we'll see if he gets another opportunity down the road. No new players have been placed on waivers here today. So of course, there's no NHL action for the next 3 nights, Thursday, Friday, actually 4 nights, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for the All-Star break. NHL games resume back on Monday, and of course, we'll have some All-Star festivities here over Friday and Saturday. Now, as I mentioned as well, the Anaheim Ducks have finally hired a new general manager, and that's longtime NHL forward and longtime NHL executive Pat Verbeek, who was before Brad Marchand had the nickname. Verbeek was known as a little ball of hate for a long time during his career. Obviously a very tough player to play against, not overly big in stature, but played big. Certainly had one heck of a long, successful career. Been involved in the NHL now for 35 years, if you count his time as a player and an off-ice roles as well. 16 years currently as an executive. He's worked a lot with Steve Yzerman over the years. So obviously they're close friends, and obviously a very well respected confidant and right-hand man of Yzerman. So he's had an opportunity to work and learn from one of the best general managers in the NHL, in my opinion. Yzerman's done a fantastic job from his time in Tampa, and then, of course, back in Detroit for the past few years here as well. So I think that's a good job by the Ducks. It was reported as well by Elliot Friedman that the other finalist that was outside of the organization was actually Jason Botterill, who is currently with the Seattle Kraken organization as an assistant, former general manager of the Buffalo Sabres. So we knew that there was another external candidate that was involved, but we didn't know who it was until now. So Botterill was that guy, and of course, like I mentioned, they had some internal candidates as well, including Solomon and Nonis, who are already working for the organization. But ultimately, the Ducks had a lot of good things to say about their internal candidates, but decided that Verbeek was the best choice. Obviously, they had not only current owners, the Samuelis, involved, but mostly the little committee they put together, some former players, including like Scott Niedermayer and Paul Kariya, who obviously helped be a part of making this decision. The Samuelis, of course, acknowledged that they're not, as involved and don't have those strong ties around the league. So it certainly made sense to kind of rely on a lot of people who did to kind of make this decision. They seem to be great owners, and certainly the type that don't interfere and meddle too much in the day-to-day hockey operations. They let their hockey people that they hire to run the organization actually do their jobs, which is very admirable. And it sounds like a great opportunity for Verbeek with a team that's kind of, higher in the standings than expected right now. They're also a team that's got a lot of tough decisions to make heading to the deadline with a lot of pending unrestricted free agents. They probably weren't anticipating being in the spot they are when it comes to the standings. So, what do? You don't want to, deduct from your team going to the playoffs after a solid year. You want to reward them, but at the same time, you have to look out for the team's future. They have a bright prospect pool as well, including Mason McTavish right at the top of that list, number 3 pick in last year's draft. You have Troy Terry, Trevor Zegras, Jamie Drysdale, Sonny Milano, all kinds of other young talent, Sam Steele, all kinds of other guys there that still are making their mark. So I think Verbeek's in a great situation. It'll be interesting to see how they proceed. They will be a very, very interesting team to watch, as I mentioned, heading to the deadline because of all those pending expiring contracts and how they're going to do here. They obviously have a little bit of time to decide, take a couple of weeks here, see how their team does, if they hold on to that playoff spot or how things are looking there. But I do expect at least some activity. They have to make some decisions probably before they know if they're going to be a playoff team. But good hire there by Anaheim. And as I mentioned, we've got numerous reports. The one I'm going to reference here is from dailyfaceoff.com, looking at the fact that a lot of NHL executives appear to be very concerned, and I'm not sure if annoyed is the right word, but certainly have a lot of issues with the fact that the plan currently for the Coyotes appears to be to move into the new arena being built for ASU, which is going to keep them into a really small facility. There's a lot of things going on. Obviously, they're going to be very, very limited. It only seats about 5,000 fans. And with the different things they're going to have to do to make it NHL ready, it's going to knock that number down to about 3,200 fans. And that's assuming they sell all the tickets. There's some spots of the arena are going to be like bleachers. They can't sell tickets for that, for NHL. So it's going to be very, very limited. I mean, we know in the NHL there's, the top, I think it's probably 8 to 10 teams make the bulk of the money. And then the bottom teams are the ones that benefit the most from the revenue sharing. And the Coyotes certainly are near the bottom of the list. And certainly, that's a concern for especially the teams that have a lot more of the revenue coming through when it comes to the merchandise and ticket sales, etc. But there really seems to be a lot of things here. I know that for a couple things. One, the Coyotes are looking at this, that they're going to be in the Tempe area. Where they want to build a new arena is not far from where ASU's arena is. So it's only, I think it's like 3 or 4 miles, or it's pretty close by. So they kind of were thinking they'll already be in the community. They can start kind of developing more of a relationship with the people and government of Tempe, which is probably not a terrible thing. But at the same time, they don't even know or have an approval yet from the local Tempe government if their bid is going to proceed or not. I mean, the last we heard, there was a lot of concerns on their part, and it was far from a guarantee that it was going to get the go-ahead, right? So certainly, I think they're waiting to finalize the, I guess it's probably like a lease agreement with ASU until they kind of know where things sit with the Tempe bid. But what if they don't approve it? Then what? What if they decide that they don't have enough information, or they want to analyze it more and they don't want to make a decision either way? They want to punt it down the road and kind of defer things and request a bunch more info, and they have to hold things up. They have the right to do that. They don't necessarily have to make a decision here, on their own time. So that's a potential issue, right? Because the Coyotes have to do a bunch of things with the ASU arena to even be able to play in the fall. They're going to have to do about $15 to $20 million of, additions or renovations, if you will, because they're not going to be allowed to share dressing rooms and all that. So they're going to have their own money sunk into the area to make it even work in the first place. It's a lot. And certainly, there's a lot of GMs and different executives that the different reporters have talked to, obviously confidential. We don't know who said what behind the scenes, that are having issues with it. We might see a scenario where some players come out of junior and play in bigger arenas than they do in the NHL when they go to Arizona. It's really not something that a lot of NHL people are very pleased with, and there's a lot of moving parts here to make it even be a situation if it's going to work out or not. I know I've heard a lot of people say just move them already, and even that would not be easy to do in time for next season. There's a lot that goes into that, obviously. So it's certainly a situation that we're going to have to monitor. I know we've heard Bill Daly, of course, who's the number 2 guy at the league behind Gary Bettman, say that they would do their best to support the move there. I don't know. I mean, it just seems like it's far from ideal, and I don't know that a lot of hockey people are going to be all that thrilled with them staying potentially there for 4 years and having very little money coming in. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to a lot of people, and it's debatable what actually happens. But a lot of that, I think, is going to be determined by what they hear from their bid in Tempe. And I'm not sure exactly when they're going to have an update on that. But if that takes too long and delays things, it could really throw a monkey wrench in here and getting anything sorted out. But we'll see where things go on that front. Now, as I mentioned, we want to take a look at some trade talk as well. Of course, we're now to the All-Star break. Some teams are going to have different schedules coming up here. The ones who had more games postponed will be a lot busier than others. A couple of players I want to take a look at. One would be Kevin Fiala of the Wild. Now, I don't suspect a trade involving Kevin Fiala before the NHL trade deadline. The Wild are having a solid season. I don't see that being the case at all. He's done actually quite well as of late. He did have some struggles and inconsistencies days earlier, but lately he's been playing a lot better. Seems like, I believe, playing a lot more with Matthew Boldy's really been helping his game too. But Fiala is a guy who's on an expiring contract. They could not come to terms on a long-term deal last summer. They have had him and Kaprizov, and they were both very contentious negotiations. Of course, Kirill got signed longer term, whereas Fiala ended up taking a one-year deal, and they decided to kind of punt it down the road and revisit it. And things were so contentious that I have concerns, obviously, that they would be that way yet again. Of course, looking at the Wild's salary cap situation beyond this current season, they're going to have a big amount of dead cap space because of the buyouts for Parise and Suter, and that's really going to inhibit their ability to really spend a lot of money elsewhere. They're going to really have to rely more so for a few years on some of their younger players being on entry-level deals and cheaper contracts while they get through this rough patch, because we're not going to be seeing any kind of substantial cap increases either, with likely only being $1 million per year for a couple seasons here before the revenue is picked up enough to justify having a salary cap increase. But certainly the fact that he could do another one-year deal and end up going to UFA status probably wouldn't sit well with the Wild, because then they'd be at severe risk to lose them for nothing. But at the same time, they may, I guess it depends on their level of confidence with that. If he'll sign for the right amount and they can get through one more season, they can renegotiate again and go from there. But it's risky business. And I'm not sure, based on if you're looking at the overall cap situation with the Wild, that Fiala will be with them beyond the current year. Elliot Friedman, in his latest 32 Thoughts blog, has mentioned here that no negotiations have started as of yet. He didn't go on to mention anything about, that there's a real major concern around that, but it's certainly a situation where nothing's been talked about yet. We're going to likely head closer to the offseason, and given the cap situation and everything, I just don't know what the long-term future holds for Fiala. But he's been playing good as of late. We'll see where things go, but I would not be surprised if we get to like the NHL draft or one of the bigger points in the offseason when there's more activity, that he'd be a player that possibly finds himself here on the move. Now, as I mentioned as well, Kasperi Kapanen in the Pittsburgh Penguins organization is apparently getting a lot of interest as well from around the NHL. We know the Penguins are likely heading for the playoffs. They're having a pretty solid year. Lots of hockey left. Lots of things can change, but right now, things look very promising for the Penguins. Certainly ahead of where I had them finishing in the standings this year. But one player that is getting attention for potential trade, like I mentioned, is Kapanen. A lot of teams are calling. If you take a look at his stats and break everything down compared to how he played in Toronto, he's getting completely different amounts of ice time, very different usage, not really killing penalties like he was used for more in Toronto. And it's just, I don't know, if you look around what they're going to have to do in Pittsburgh, they have a very tight cap situation heading into the offseason. They've got Evgeny Malkin on an expiring contract. They got Brian Rust, Rodriguez as well, who's had a phenomenal year for them. All need new contracts within the forward group. You get Chris Letang on the back end. They're going to need to figure out goaltending as well, because it's either re-sign to Smith or get another goalie. Either way, there's a lot to look after there. So clearly, Kapanen is drawing interest for a couple of reasons. One, out of all the players in their forward group, he's probably a little bit more expendable than a lot of them. And secondly, given their cap situation, he might be a guy that needs to go eventually anyway. So, teams are looking and saying, okay, we could use somebody who can play that middle six role, play with good speed, good pace, and kill penalties for us while chipping in on the offense. And he could be that kind of player like he was in Toronto. But I'm not really sure things have worked out exactly how the Penguins had envisioned when they reacquired him. He was originally drafted by the Penguins, of course, and was originally involved in that Phil Kessel trade that sent Kessel from Toronto to the Penguins, where, of course, he won multiple Stanley Cups before moving on himself. So Kapanen could be a guy that the Penguins use here at the deadline if they want to upgrade other areas. They've certainly been mentioned in different rumors, and I would be surprised if we don't see Ron Hextall and Brian Burke and company there trying to make some additions to make the team have another shot at going for another cup here going into the playoffs. So we'll see where that works out. And lastly, Patrik Laine in Columbus. We know things have not been the greatest for him during his time with the Jackets. Obviously, this year has been a little different as well. Had some stuff going on off the ice, which impacted things. And of course, last year with Tortorella, didn't really work out. And of course, he's now pending RFA again. Getting closer, a little bit closer to free agency. Still has a little ways to go before he gets there, though. You have to wonder if the Jackets are going to go more into a rebuild here, if he becomes expendable. Now, listening to the Cold Stove podcast, which certainly features a lot of NHL trade talk and latest rumors, certainly they talked about the possibility of Laine being a target for the Anaheim Ducks. Now, of course, again, this could be a trade deadline acquisition, but it doesn't have to be. Again, this could be something in the offseason, because they talked a lot about the fact that the Ducks, even though, as I mentioned earlier with the Verbeek hire, a lot of tough decisions and interesting moves going to be coming out of that organization. Depending on what they do, might be deciding on when they can possibly afford to add Laine to the mix here. But can you imagine Patrik Laine being mixed in with a guy like Trevor Zegras? If they can get Laine back to his 40-goal type of ways he was playing like in Winnipeg, that would be a tremendous addition. He's still young, and if they could sort out a longer-term contract for him, it might be wise. It's pretty well known that the Jackets are, like I said, not really loving the Laine acquisition right now. Things have not worked out exactly the way things have, were expected to. I guess projected asking price might be possibly multiple first-round picks, or at least two. Probably looking at least two assets at first-round quality is what is expected. But of course, that's not coming directly from the team. We don't really know. That's just an estimate or a guess based on the ones going to talk about this on the podcast here. But certainly, I think Laine likely does get moved. If it's not before the deadline, I'm going to say in the offseason is probably a little bit more likely. But still, it's a situation where I think Anaheim would be a terrific landing spot for him. Would not be surprising if he did end up there at all. I know the Ducks, before the change in GM with Bob Murray and everything, they were looking for a big-time forward, especially to come in. They were involved in Eichel. I believe they might have been involved, but I'm not completely certain, on the Laine sweepstakes the first time. It was when he was being traded out of Winnipeg, when those rumors kind of heated up as well. But I think he'd be a great fit there. Be interesting to see where things go. But these are certainly three players that they may not all be traded by the deadline. I would be surprised if maybe one of them is, but these are all moves that are probably more likely for later, that we're likely going to see in the offseason when teams have more money, more flexibility, more cap space, etc. to make it happen. I think we're going to have a busy time going to the deadline, and we very well could have a busy offseason as well. So let me know your thoughts on everything discussed here today. Down in the comments, we'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.